Even though I've said great things about sports, it's also been, I guess, one of the sometimes it's quite painful because of the background I have.
So hi everyone, welcome to another season of QUEERxBodies, where we invite LGBTIQ youth all over Asia Pacific to share about how their experiences intersect with their advocacies online and offline. So we have a special guest for today, our first interviewee for the season 3 of QXB. We have Emery Fung. So Emery, would you kindly tell us about yourself?
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me. First of all, really excited for this chat. I watched a few videos before, so really, it's a pleasure for me to be on here as well. So a bit about myself, a bit of context. So my name is Emery. I'm from Hong Kong. I'm born in Hong Kong, and then majority of my life I spent here. But I also actually lived a lot out in the UK. I went to school there for about 13 years, so I used to travel back and forth between Hong Kong and UK quite a lot. And yes, as soon as I finished my university, I came back because my family is still based in Hong Kong, and then been here ever since. And been back for this is now my I think 6.5 year now, almost 7th year back fully in Hong Kong, and I've been in recruitment industry ever since.
Still very much part of the youth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So you also mentioned before that you are an athlete. So I'd like to know, like, what got you into sports? I know you moved from UK to there. So how did you keep that going?
Yeah, so actually, I've always been to sports. Even like the youngest memory I have is always been about doing sports or running around and doing something like that. And I've got an older sister, but interestingly, she has a lot of she studied like piano. She had dance lessons and she had like ballet lessons. Whereas I've always just had football, swimming, table tennis, or whatever it is in the summer. So I've always been quite sporty in what I do. And then when I went to school in the UK, I think that obviously that made it a bit more even easier to do more sports in the UK, because I think sports is obviously a big part. It's a lot more space compared to Hong Kong, so it's a more of a easier access. But my main sports, I would say, probably football. Hockey are kind of my two field hockey, my two main sports, but I also do a lot of many other things. I wake surf, I'll play badminton, I'll play whatever. But overall, sports overall, whatever sports it is, I usually do, but mainly kind of football and hockey are my main sports.
That's a lot. As
Yeah.
somebody who's not into sports at all, that's amazing for me. Like, you're just naturally athletic like that. And you did say before that you were into sports. It was great because you were able to be in touch with your masculine side.
Mm.
You know, somewhere everybody has a level playing field, as you said, where they can fully express themselves. But you also mentioned that by the same token, playing sports in a binary also comes with its own challenges. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So even though I've said great things about sports, it's also been, I guess, one of sometimes it's quite painful because of the background I have. So I was born female,
Mhm.
and identify myself as male. So in terms of playing sports, especially in the UK, well, not just in the UK, I guess sports in general. Usually, most sports are quite binary in terms of how they categorize it, or how it's being played, or how it's being coached in school or wherever. So in the UK, it's very traditional where you play field hockey and you play like sports like netball, which means usually you'll be wearing a skirt when you're
Mhm.
playing sports. And on top of that, I went to an all-girls school when I was younger. So that was a lot of things to kind of process when I was much younger, where sports was one thing that I kind of really was always drawn to because of the masculine side of things. I used to hang out with my dad a lot more when I was younger, before I left the UK, and then a lot of things that we did was around hiking or sports related, and that's how I made a lot of friends as well when I was in Hong Kong. And going to the UK, it also helped me make a lot of friends. Being in a foreign country, being so young, is a very easy kind of way to make friends without having the language. Back then, when I didn't really speak much English, so it was always a great thing. But when it comes to the changing rooms, when it comes to kind of going there afterwards, being in an environment where it's just girls, it does sometimes it's quite I guess it's quite ironically kind of painful, but at the same time I still really enjoy it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely made sense. I do have a follow-up question. So, how did you push on, through all of these experiences? So, like, what kept you going as an athlete? Because there were like, different boundaries, especially like as a transgender person. Like, how is that? Like, how did you overcome that?
I mean, for me, I think because it was such a no-brainer that I wanted to keep playing sports. So it was a thing that I just always knew that I wanted to do. I want to be involved in it in some sorts. But I can definitely see, if you were someone that were okay with sports, you're not like that passionate. There's actually a lot of ways or a lot of barriers for you to go through to play sports as a LGBT plus person in that community.
Mm-hmm.
But for myself, really, I think it was because that it was for me. It was at the same time it was a very safe space where I can really express myself. I can be a bit more aggressive. I can be a bit more running around, that kind of stuff. So I was able to express myself a bit more as well. But obviously being in an environment where you have to wear a skirt, you have to wear so and so. That sometimes is a bit of a drawback. Having said that, because I went to all girls school, and the uniform was obviously a skirt. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
because I play a lot of sports, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I can actually wear my PE kit during the day as well into lessons. So again, there's actually some good bits and bad bits all at the same time. So it gave me a lot of kind of leeway to not wear traditional skirts and traditional kind of uniform. But at the same time, that there are times when we actually playing the sport that you have to be in a certain uniform. And I guess what I was telling myself is that as much as it sucks in terms of not being able to wear what you want.
Mm-hmm.
I was quite, I guess, acceptive in the fact that I knew there's not really much I can do in terms of that situation. There's only so much you can do. For me, I was quite open with all my friends and everyone around me at the time that that's the way I was feeling. Maybe I wasn't be able to put into words as much as I can now, but I was being quite open in terms of how I was feeling, what I was expressing. So I think being quite open, being quite honest with your friends, that also helped me not feeling a bit kind of isolated, even when you're in a team sports environment, because people were aware, and people were they were understanding as well. I think especially when you were a bit more younger, there's usually, I would say, a bit more openness to it when I'm talking about when you were 9, 10, 11, 12. So that really helped me early on. And yeah, and then I'll just telling myself that when I get older, once I get out of school, this training will also help me to compete with the boys, or play with boys, or whatever it may be. So yes, I guess just thinking that there is going to be eventually a way I can use this time in the future. It doesn't mean that just because I'm stuck in school, it has to be in a girls' team, that it means that's going to be the same thing forever.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad that you brought up the idea as well of like, just being honest with your friends, because it's important to have this whole support group and the whole community that, you're part of as the years go on, as you face more opportunities or challenges along the way. So I think that's good as well. Transition to this other thing that you do online. You did say that you have a podcast called The
Mm.
Awkward Turtle. I know it's not specifically an LGBT inclusion, but it's all about shared experiences as well.
I think in the next couple of years, there'll definitely be a lot more stories about people starting their own thing in the midst of the pandemic. So that's how I started. It was the first time ever where I had time and really slow down, be like, oh, this is what I'm actually interested in doing. Let's do it. I've always listened to podcasts before, and I think most people who runs their own podcast also listen to a lot of podcasts. And when I first, found out what podcasting is, and you realize there's so many stuff that you can do with it, I just felt I was very drawn to it immediately, because what I like about the podcasting world is that it's just audio. There's no distraction. You're not looking at what they're wearing, you're not looking at their background, and looking at their environment. It's just pure audio. I started first of all, kind of what I call like a season one, which is Okotelo, and it's more like a 10-minute short kind of solo podcast where I just talked about kind of my life, and talked about kind of the funny things that happens with me when I was in the UK, going to a all girls school and things like that. And there's actually one episode right towards the end that I actually kind of went through, or talked about my whole transition process, about how I was dealing with it with my parents, how the reaction I was getting, but it's in a very kind of light manner. So some of them have some jokes in there, have some kind of sound effects, which the reaction was quite good. I think a lot of people still listen to it, which is great. But didn't last very long, so I only had 13 episodes in that season because I realized that it's a lot more work than what I thought it was going to be. So I took a pause and kind of changed things around a little bit. So now what I'm doing now is still awkward turtle, but I've just added the awkward turtle at work in the end. I haven't really specified that podcast to have LGBT element in it, but I've actually had quite a few people who are from that community on the podcast as well, because I thought it was quite important to let people know or have those voices or have those experiences being shared. I also have these kind of voices in the podcast as well, and a lot of them to do with how they kind of found their way and utilize that. We kind of merge that into the career as well, so it's quite interesting. You hear, I would say, more or less all of them becomes you can kind of hear like a common theme at the end.
What can you say is like, why is it important and valuable to bring these things online, and would you have any advice in the future for anybody who would be eager to hear this or read about this?
I was definitely one of those people who would just follow people, never post anything because I didn't want to put myself out there, and a lot of it was consuming what I was being online. And what the turning point was for me was that actually when I came out on LinkedIn as transgender. So I started to do my medical transition about 2 years ago now, and there's come to a point where I had to change my name, and because of the nature of work I'm in, I just felt it was appropriate to write a really small post on LinkedIn about my name is now Emery, these are the reasons why, etc. And the pure kind of the reason why I did it is more because I just needed people to know my new email address, and that was kind of the only reason. And the reaction I got was just overwhelmingly so positive. I had people reaching out to me, people I didn't know, to connect and say thank you for being so honest and being so open. I had my old bosses reached out. Even my high school teachers reached out from the UK to say congratulations. And so that made me change a lot my perspective on how I thought social media is like. I always know obviously you can create content and things, but I never thought about doing it myself. And since I had the post on LinkedIn, I had a lot of people reaching out, and that's how I also got involved with gay games as well. This is where I volunteer at the moment, which is happening in Hong Kong in 2023. Another really exciting event for Asia, first time in Asia, first time in Hong Kong, have such a big kind of organization out here as well. And then eventually I had my TEDx talk as well, which at the time of recording now, it happened about 2 weekends ago, so it's still quite fresh. And yeah, so the TEDx was more about as well kind of a merge of my transition story as well as my kind of podcast together. The idea is really to let people know that you can do whatever you want, or you can find what it is that is suitable to you, but that ultimately is down to you. Having that just one post online on LinkedIn is just snowballing into all this stuff that I'm doing at the moment, and that's how I got involved with even doing more volunteering with gay games in sports, and hopefully having gay games in Hong Kong as well is going to let more people know about the LGBT community in Asia. With I think sports is a great thing, because I think sports was the first thing that I utilized, that when you don't have the language available, you can somehow still connect with people.
So yeah, you did mention about Gay Games Hong Kong, and we're looking forward to that. It was moved to 2023. Hopefully, we're going to also be there as community partners. So we might see each other there. All right.
Yes,
so
that would be great.
Right, that would be great. Like just more reason to what do you call it? Just connect with the people that you work at the same advocacy.
Yeah, and also I think that's what we all need after the last 2 years. Everyone's had a big, massive celebratory event that celebrates everyone.
Yes, some fresh air and like just getting to see people instead of
Exactly.
being on screen and all of that. Are there any social media pages you would like to share where people can continue to follow your story, or maybe continue seeing the work that you do with GGHK or your podcast? Feel free to share it right now.
Thank you. So Instagram and LinkedIn are probably the most common places that I post content. So Instagram would be efung, EFUNG 94 is my handle. LinkedIn is just if you search Emery Fung, EMERYFUNG, then you can probably find me. Not a lot of people with that name, so that usually I come up that's the first one. And apart from that, I also have the podcast, obviously. So obviously it's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the usual kind of podcasting platforms. So if you just search that, that usually comes up. But if you want to kind of really follow it and follow kind of the behind the scene work as well, I've got a website. So it's www.awkwardturtle.page. Awkwardturtlepodcast.page is a URL. And then if you go on there, you can join a newsletter where I basically share about kind of all the other things that I do behind the scenes apart from the podcast stuff.